Today I have a 1995 300zx stereo in the shop. This is usually for the 93-95 it's a common radio. For 90-92 it's a common radio, and 88-89 was a different radio as well. But this radio has intermittent power. This is a common problem with the 93-96. I no longer repair this radio, so I'm going to do this video to show you how to take care of many of the problems with this. We're going to start with our small Phillips screwdriver and remove the 4 screws that are on the top. I have help on the website for removing the stereo. I also have a do-it-yourself repair video there for the scratchy or staticky volume controls and so on, but we'll hit all that in this video as well. The scratchy volume controls was for the earlier stereos. So now we have 4 screws removed from the top cover. We're going to take our small flathead screwdriver and pry at the very back edge to lift the back edges of this cover up. This will unlock the front. We can lift it up and remove the cover. Now what we have here is a cassette mechanism, the volume controls. If you have the scratchy volume controls, there are plenty of openings in the top here. You can spray your chemical or contact cleaner in here, no lubricant, because the lubricant remains, just a solution that dissipates, and then rotate the knob. A lot of times taking the side of your finger to the knob and just rotating it quickly can clean it up without even using any of the chemicals. But usually the problem for this sits underneath the cassette mechanism here, back in this area, and on this main board. This main board in this opening has a little clip in the back that's twisted. So we're going to take our small needle nose pliers and go down in and twist that piece of metal around. Sometimes you need a longer pair of needle nose to get in there. Sometimes it takes a little prying to get it off to the side and so on. But what this does is it's going to free up the back board here. Now that that's been twisted off here, we'll be able to take this back metal piece with this circuit board and lift this straight up. And it comes right up and it's unattached. We're going to get to this piece in a little bit. This is the main problem for this one. But we're also going to turn over to the bottom, because I mentioned there was a problem underneath the cassette mechanism. And what we're going to do is remove 4 screws on the bottom here that secure the cassette mechanism into the radio. Again, if you need help with removal or the Bose speaker repair, I still do that. I do have removal guides for that. There are 5 screws here on the bottom. We're only removing 4. The one in the middle at the very back stays presently. We haven't gotten to that one yet, but we'll see how that goes. Now, we're going to notice that the cassette mechanism is loose, so we're going to put our hand in underneath the radio and come back to the top since it is loose. We're going to grab this bundle of wires on the right side, and we're sort of going to wiggle it up and loose to release this connector. Now it only fits back in one way. You don't have to worry about labeling any of these connectors or anything like that as well. Next I'm going to take my small Phillips and go underneath the bundle wire over here, underneath this piece of foam. This foam usually deteriorates and causes all sorts of problems. But we're going to do the same thing we did on the other side, but we're going to use the Phillips screwdriver to help lift these wires up, because I can't get my finger down in this little crack. Now there's one connector here at the front that has 6 wires and one here at the back with 2 wires. Now these connectors only fit back into their spots in one way, so there's no need of figuring out which way they go. Now this should free the cassette mechanism up, and we'll take this up and out of the way and set that to the side. We can see right away the belt. The problem with the cassette players in most cases is we have the belt here, and this belt is totally deteriorated, and it's going to take a lot of cleaning to get this tape or this belt that's turned into this black tar now. So we're going to clean up all the flywheels, remove this cover, clean the flywheels, replace the belt. The only other common problem with this is a bad motor, which is no longer available. But the belts are still available. That will take care of the cassette player. Now we're down in the to the major piece. I can still see pieces of the belt have fallen out and down onto the cassette mechanism, or down onto the main board here. I'm going to pick this off very gently because it's turned into a tar that if you touch it, it goes everywhere. So we're going to try and see if we can clean this up now before I get it everywhere. Oh, good, that's cleaning up real well, but it's sticking to the tweezers here. You can see the belts slipping and stretching. So, okay, now we have that all out of the way. You can see how it turns into tar, and this really goes everywhere. So we're going to make sure we clean these tweezers up and don't get it anywhere else on the next radio. Okay, now we get the belt pieces out of here. Now I'm going to point out to you the common problems here. But first we're going to go down to this black connector here. Actually, I'm going to back up. We're going to start with the knob on the volume control, and we're going to remove this knob because it helps hold the faceplate in place. Next we have a connector at the very back or front of the radio, a black one that goes across, and has a little collar on each side. We're going to push this collar down towards down. You can see it releasing. I'm going to do this for both sides. This connector moves about 1/8 of an inch, and what this does, it releases the lock on this gold ribbon cable, which we're going to get to here in a minute. Over here to the left is a second one with a blue ribbon cable. We're going to push the collars out on the side of that to push them down. They go about 1/4 of an inch, or excuse me, 1/8 of an inch, and stop. Next we're going to come back to the side, take our fingernail, go underneath the edge of this clip and release the edge over these two little locks. We're going to do the same for the opposite side. This is going to cause the face to sometimes come off real easily, or maybe the top will hinge off a bit. But there are also two little tabs on the bottom here. And you can see these openings in the tabs that go into little tabs that go down, so the face has to come in and lock in onto these tabs when it goes back into the front underneath to lock the bottom of the face in. Now we're going to pull this forward, and hopefully the ribbon cables come loose, and we have two ribbon cables. Usually I find the gold one, because it's been in the radio so long, is sort of stuck to this tape that's on the back, and we're going to pull this off just a little bit because we're going to need the extra 1/2 inch there when it comes to put these back in. And to put these ribbon cables back in, you place them into, well, we're going to get the face as close as we can. You place them back into the opening. Make sure they go flat or as far in as they can. There's a little tab on it. You can see through the ribbon cable a white tab. Make sure that that's parallel with the top edge of the connector, and then you're going to lock it right into place. And that locks the connector into place. Now we're going to remove this connector. Now if you're having backlight problems, there are several banks of backlights on this radio. When you're in radio mode, you get the bottom half of each button lights up. When you're in cassette mode, the top half opens. So depending on if you've checked before you disassemble this which bulbs are missing, there are usually 3 here that deal with the backlighting of this side of the control at all times. And then there's several bulbs underneath this black tape also that control the 2 banks of lighting for cassette or radio. These bulbs are called grain of wheat. They can be soldered in place to take care of that. This takes care of the backlighting problem. Now we're getting down to the main problem here that is commonly seen with this radio. You would think it would be a breakdown of components in this section of the radio, but it is not. The problem is here with this radio is a glue problem. Now what I mean by glue is they took some of the taller components, this one here specifically, and this one here in the front, and what they did, because if they were to stand up, the cassette mechanism wouldn't go in, so they laid them over on their side. And when they laid them over on their side, they also, prying this component to stand up, put glue down on the board. Now this glue is all down along the side of the component, and it's on the circuit board. That goes for this one here in the front as well. This one we can pull up and we can see the corrosion and everything down underneath the capacitor as well. Now what we're going to do is turn a couple of the twists here. We have a twist here in the front, And we're going to turn this so that this tab lines up with the opening in the circuit board. There is one here in the front. There is got to be another. Okay. There is the one here in the front. We're going to turn this over and remove the 3 screws. Actually, I said earlier there was 5 screws holding in the bottom. Actually, there's 7. 3 hold the back of the circuit board in. The other 4 hold the cassette. The good thing is about this, all the screws that go in the bottom are short little screws with washers. The 4 real long screws, fine thread screws, those go in the top to hold the cover in. Now, it looks like I've got all those out. Oh, I missed a twist. I knew there was more than one. There is one right in the center of the board here that I forgot to do. And we're going to twist this one up and straighten it out. And hopefully this will allow us to lift the circuit board up and out. Ha! I said 7 screws. There are 8. The 8th one's here up on the volume control. Now this should allow that board to drop right out. And the board does drop right out. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to remove this component. We're going to remove this component. You can make notes as to what the component is, positive and negative, before you remove these. I've done this 1 or 2 times before today. So I'm pretty much aware of what component goes where and where they're located. That removes one. We're going to remove the second. And unsolder the other leg. And we've got both components dropped right out. We're going to set these to the side. We're going to replace these because they do have glue on it, and it's easier to replace them than to scratch the glue off them. But we're going to come back to the main circuit board here. And I had mentioned the glue, and when I look closer I can see a 3rd spot of glue down on the side of this coil. So I'm going to remove this coil as well now that I've looked closer. And we're going to take this solder sucker and put it right on here. Again, I mentioned, if you want to know how to remove the equipment, or I have videos for that. Now we have 3 spots with this glue in it. I'm going to take the edge of my flathead screwdriver and try to scratch it up without damaging the board. Sometimes it'll flake right up, other times it won't. It doesn't look like it's coming up too easily in this case and this time. But what happens here is this glue is a soft glue, but as you're taking it off of the circuit board, you can see that it's become old and crusty. And what happens with it is that it dries out, and it tends to start absorbing moisture. And this moisture, of course, causes conducting between the glue, and because it's over a bank of traces here, usually something opens up here that causes the no power, or the radio doesn't power up, or we may have the problem down here underneath this where this cap was too. Usually you can see, if you look real closely at the green on the circuit board, or the light green traces, you can see they're dark in a spot here. This is where the moisture causes conducting between the different traces and can eat the traces. They deteriorate the traces. Usually I find one trace open back here, possibly one here. In some cases I find 2 or 3 back here and 1 or 2 up front, depending on how bad the unit is. But we're going to scratch all this glue back, and then of course we're going to take our meter out and do a continuity test and check all the fuses, either put jumpers in and follow the traces out, and to repair this circuit board. Also, one of the main problems with this circuit board are the larger surface mount resistors. We're going to get that into the next section of the radio that usually causes the intermittent power. These 2 problems usually cause the power being dead and not turning on. But we have a resistor here that sits here in the back. what we're going to do before we put this back together is resolder both sides of this resistor. We're going to look for all the larger components that are resistors. There are 3 here in a row as well. And then we have 2 down here as well. They're usually near transistors, and for power supplies to help dissipate the heat, that's why they're so big. They can have bad connections, so resolder all these as well. This will take care of the motherboard, and now we have left the remaining board, which causes the intermittent problems. What we're going to do here is remove this heat sink for a component that's here in the back, and to do that we have 1, 2, 3 solder connections coming across the back here. I'm going to see if I can unsolder these connections real easily. There's 1. There's 2. And 3. Now, this is going to give us access to see what's wrong here. I'm going to take the pliers again and straighten these tabs out since we've unsoldered them, so they'll pass through the openings in the circuit board. This goes for all 3. Line them up well. We'll be putting this back on when we're done. Now we got that lined up. I find the holes are rather tight, so I take my flathead screwdriver and go along the edge and try and pry it up away from the board. Try and make it evenly all the way around so you don't make any messes coming back through the circuit board. We're going to set this piece of metal to the side. Again, we're back to this component. This one looks like it's been pretty much cleaned up. Normally what I find is the same thing I found down on the motherboard. There is usually glue down in this area here. But if you look as well, I had mentioned the intermittent power, and you can see the larger surface mount resistors. Normally what it takes in this area is to remove this coil because of the glue down underneath it. Sometimes the glue is all over the board where this transistor has to come out. Make sure you make a marking as to which way this transistor came out so you put it back in the same way. And again, we have the 4 big surface mounts here. If you look down under the edge, there are 3 more over here. Now what you're going to do is resolder all these components because of this is a big power supply and the heat has to dissipate, and these components can have bad connections. A lot of times I found that when I solder one side of this, the component comes right off the board because the other side's not soldered on. Again, look for the large surface mount resistors, 1 here, 4 here, and 3 underneath. Now this should take care of all the problems. If you're looking for specific parts for this radio, I can help you out there. But if this has been helpful, please let me know. If you have any questions, give me a call. Thumbs up, please.